Naomi is the young lady in Zambia that's working on this project while the folks here in the United States are here. And however, right now she does not have power, and so is unable to join in, although I had extended her the invitation. Also, I want to give a special shout out to John Gibbons. I see he's on. He's the chair of this vocational training team committee. I think it would be more the Global Grants Committee, and then Lee Mullaney from Springfield was chair of the VTT as well. So they kind of co-chaired it. So I look to them as kind of my boss, you might say, bosses. And also special thanks to Bob and Judy Bertles. I know Bob's a member of your club, and they have the Vision of Hope, and so they've been really helpful in helping us get this project started. They were kind of the recipient, even though they didn't get any of the funds. They let us, it flowed through their organization, and they really helped facilitate on the ground when we first got there. And, you know, as we've been there several times now, we've been able to not be such a burden on the local Vision of Hope folks down there in Zambia, but a special shout out to them as well for all of their help. So I gave this program a few weeks ago in Highland. It's kind of lengthy, I know. It's longer than most Rotary meetings. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can, but I know Rotary, you know, everyone's on a time schedule. Leave when you need to leave. I'm not going to be offended. I'm going to give you all I can. I'm going to condense as much as I can. If you got questions, just go ahead and interrupt and ask a question, and eventually we'll get through it. So anyway, I would say if it runs like it did last week, or I mean a few weeks ago, it was almost 45 minutes. So I'll try to shorten up a little bit, but again, no hard feelings if you have to leave. Now also, I did this before, but I'm going to need someone to help me. I know I can bring this PowerPoint up, excuse me, but excuse me, I'm not sure the exact way that I do that. So if someone could give me the guidance on how to make it where you can see that. Can someone tell me how to do that?
Yes, please. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's where it says share screen.
Share, got it.
Right in the middle. Yeah, so you click that, and then we'll start seeing your screen.
Okay, so let me pull this up. So are you seeing this now or not?
No, we're just seeing your handsome face at this point.
I'm sorry, you're seeing what?
We're just seeing your handsome face.
Oh. Okay, so let me go back and try this again. Share. Okay, I've got share. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'll need the host to undo that. Who would that be?
I think I just did that, so.
No. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, yeah, it looks different now. So here we go. Okay, does that look any different? Are you seeing the slideshow now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about this as kind of two parts, and then I'll kind of wrap up with kind of the go forward plan or vision. And the first part of this was the actual vocational training team, and that really was a 2018-19 event. And I was asked to lead that team, and I was delighted to do so. It was the district. It was our first vocational training team that we've put forward, and we cooperated with the Kwanzaa Rotary Club there in Lusaka. And to give you a little kind of overview, if you're not familiar with Africa, Zambia is the country we're working in. And if you look at this map of Africa and look at the very bottom, you see South Africa. And if you go north one country, you've got Botswana, and then just north of that is Zambia. So it's sub-Saharan, and so that lets you kind of position that in your mind. And this is the actual country itself, Zambia. And if you look kind of along that southeastern border next to Zimbabwe and Mozambique, you'll see the province of Lusaka. And kind of on the left side of that province is the little red airplane, and that's the Lusaka airport. That's where we fly into. And the city, we have stayed in Lusaka, the city. It's a good size, several million people live there. And but the community that we're working in is about 35 to 40 miles east of there. It's called Chongwe. It doesn't show up on this map, but it's along that little red line that goes east out of Lusaka, and that's called the Great East Road. And so that's where we're working. I've got a few slides to give you an overview of what it looks like there. And so this is rural Chongwe, and this is a little, what you're seeing is not a village, it's a few homes that would be a part of a village. The little home settlements are kind of scattered around, and this was just taken from the road. It's just nothing special about it. It's just you drive by this and see a lot of these little settlements, I guess you might say, or clusters of homes. And this, if you were to go in, this is not the same little cluster of homes I just showed, but this is a typical one. This is what you would see on the, right there in the center, that round building is the kitchen. And then the three buildings that you can see, kind of part of them on the right, those would be different homes. So it might be like a family with maybe a couple of sons or a daughter, as they get married, they might build a home right in that same little close area to where they grew up. This another home, you can see the round shed to the right with the thatched roof, that's the kitchen. And the home there in the center, and this actually belongs to one of the initial project farmers, and this is her. Her name is Judith, and she just did a great job for us that first year. We were in her home there. A typical home would have 3 rooms. We're in the center room where the door was, if you think back to that photo I just showed. And to the left, you can't see it, but if you were to kind of turn and look to the left from where I'm standing when I took this photo, there would be an open entryway, much like the one to the right, and that would go into a storage room. And the opening with the curtain hanging on it, I presume is a bedroom. I didn't go in there, but that's about the only thing left, I guess you might say. So it's very sparsely furnished. I would say Judith is very typical of the folks there. Some that we're working with are a little better off. Some perhaps a little worse off, but she would be very typical. You can see it's pretty Spartan furnishings, but you will also notice it's neat as a pin and very clean. This is a power source, and so you can see they've got the little solar panel running a transistor radio to get the news. Some would have something bigger. It might be maybe a 18-inch by 24-inch solar panel mounted on the roof or something, and they could power maybe a small appliance or a TV. But this, again, is kind of typical of what you would see. This is another, this home belongs to Crispin Kacha, another one of our, excuse me, lead farmers. And I point this out because there's a difference here. You may not think about it at first, but if you look at this, and I'm going to back up to Judith's home. So if you look at her home, and now let's go forward to Crispin Kacha's home. See, he's got windows, he's got that little porch, he's got a little awning there. So there are some differences. As people can do a little bit better, they will. And then if also in this photo, if you look to the left of the home, our left, that is a little thatched building, and that is the toilet. So it's basically, it's a hole in the ground. It's got some kind of platform over it, and it's surrounded by this thatched grass for privacy. So that's very typical, and you see that in, this is a rural area, but in the city of Chongwe, you still see this very similar arrangement. This is a community well, and so multiple families, a village will share this well. Over the course of a day, we'll drive by several of them. I've never really measured it out to see how far apart they are, but if I were just kind of guess, I'd say maybe, some folks don't have to go very far to get their water, but some might walk a couple miles. And typically you'll see maybe the kids, with each carrying a 5-gallon bucket in each hand, and there might be 2 or 3 of them. So that's just another kind of typical. The water is good. I've consumed it myself, and no ill effects, so I guess it's okay. This is Lusaka, the city. This is the main boulevard in town, and so I'm going to show a couple photos to juxtaposition Lusaka, the city, and Chongwe, the rural area. So you can see this is bumper to bumper traffic, and this is common during the rush hour in the morning and in the evening. The roads are they vary from pretty good to really bad, even in the city. And so and there's a lot of traffic. So traveling in the city during rush hour is not advisable. And here is a road in Chongwe. And this is very typical. This is almost the only kind of road that I drive on once we get out of the community of Chongwe, which has a hard road. Great East Road goes through it. And there's a couple of hard roads that that go south out of town. But when you get away from those, it's all like this. So this is either Pick and Pay or ShopRite, the two main grocery franchises in Lusaka. You might think you're in St. Louis, and this is the market in Chongwe. You'll also, of course, there are many of these little stands like this, not just this one. And you'll also actually see this in Lusaka. You get off of the main drag a few blocks, and you will see this very kind of thing in Lusaka as well as in Chongwe. So there are a lot of extremes, I guess you might say. Okay, so now to the actual project itself. The goal of the vocational training team was to help the project farmers increase their production of corn. It's called maize all over the world. We call it corn, but maize, corn, same thing. We wanted to utilize techniques and inputs that they could do themselves once we were gone. And it had to be sustainable. In other words, Rotary doesn't have any interest in just, funding the same people year after year after year. They need to be able to do it on their own. So we worked within those constraints. And the team, which consisted of John Meese, an agronomist from Jacksonville, Todd Steinacher, agronomist from Carrollton, and myself, other team members as well. I mentioned John and Lee, and there were others, many that stayed here in the United States and helped a bunch. But that was the initial travel team, the three of us. And so when we got over there, together, the three of us, were going to have 1 week. They left after a week. I stayed for 2 more to kind of carry on. But we had to assess the situation as it stood. What were the factors limiting their production? And then what were the resources locally available that could be deployed to help them do better? So this is what we found. The ground was very hard, very low organic matter. These are ancient soils formed, millions of years ago or a long time ago. Low fertility, very acidic. There's very little to no mechanization among this group of farmers. So they're limited by what they can physically get done. And then, they don't have the financial resources to really do a lot to improve. However, we did find that inputs are readily available. There's a wide selection of different fertilizer compounds. There's a good cadre of ag professionals like seed salesmen, the local ag retailers, the local extension agents. So there are good ag professionals there, and they want to help. The farmers that we work with are very eager to learn and adopt new methods. They realize, as progressive farmers all over the world realize, there's a lot we don't know. And so we want to learn and do better, and they do as well. And also, they tend to be fairly close knit. So there were 10, it turned out to be 11, but 10 originally farmers were selected, and we kind of had the, final say on them. A couple dropped out, we added a couple, and we wound up with 11. But even though they were from 5 different villages, they all knew each other already. And within the village, there seems to be a cooperative spirit. So that was good, and that will be important going forward. So we had to develop a training program and put that on. We had to help them do what we suggested in a no-risk manner. So because we were going to stretch their comfort zone, and so we didn't want them to feel like they were, sticking their neck out without some support. We wanted to monitor we wanted to know if what we were teaching them was working. We didn't know, because that's Africa. And so, we had to stay and learn, or go back multiple times and learn. We wanted to provide in-season crop scouting and also help them help them understand the process of crop scouting. collect and evaluate the results, and then we wanted to provide feedback to the growers. And really that last bullet point is one of the most important, because we continue to want to provide that feedback. We are learning as we go over there and see what's working. And we also, so tell them, and if there's something that we're suggesting that doesn't work or doesn't work as well, we tell them that too. It's not that our methods are necessarily something that we know are going to work. We're learning as we go as well, but by and large, it is working. We did some soil testing. We brought home soil test kits, and that's John, one of our team members, doing some testing in his bathroom at the hotel. This is Todd doing some training for that first group of farmers. The gentleman there on the left, that's William. He's the extension agent there, and he's been, really helpful. So we provided 1 acre of inputs and asked that they do as we suggested with those inputs on 1 acre, and then farm another acre according to their traditional methods that they would normally use. And so that was how this came about. We also worked with some on soybeans. We feel like crop rotation will really help them, and they're doing very little crop rotation. And so this is one of our farmers, Estelanica, and this is a 55-pound bag of soybean seed on her head. So I was going to carry this in the house for her, and she just laughed, said, give me that. She took it in her arms and just slung it up on her head. I was impressed. So we also provided a little bit of equipment. This is an ox-drawn planter, that yellow and red item in the back. We provided a few of those. Some share them. We bought a couple of them, some oxen, because they could share a planter and share the oxen, and it just worked out a little bit better than that. If we had more time, we could have finessed that even a little better yet, but given the time constraint, we got it pretty close really on that. So the results of the first year. This was in, as I said, we were in 5 villages. This was in Kapuka village. If you look at the photo at the lower left-hand corner, that would be the 2 piles of corn. The 4 ears that are very small would be the traditional corn, and the 4 nice ears are those that came from the project field. Then if you look just to the right of that, you'll see the grain storage facility. And of course, this is just a little small part of that, but this is the project corn piled in there. And this farmer, her name is Mary, and this is the roof of one of the sheds out there at her place, and that is the entire production from her traditional field laying on the roof of that building. That would not fill a bushel basket. They had a really bad drought last year, and the traditional corn, some of it was a total failure. So those results were pretty good. We wound up, Mary and Ruth, that's a mother and daughter, that's how we wound up with 11, but we kind of counted it as 10 because they kind of farmed together. But so out of all 10 of our farmers, the project field was better every single time. The best that the conventional fields did was 81%. That was pretty good. And I was asking the grower, I said, wow, this corn's pretty good. Tell me about it. He said, I believed in your method so much, I just did that on everything. So he really, I think maybe it was just a difference. He had a different hybrid or something like that, but the fertility and everything else he did across his entire farm, because he was sold on it. And he had some really good corn too. If we averaged all of it together, the project fields were 230%. The production off of those fields was 230% that of the conventional, more than twice as good. And what we found was that in those areas like Mary, where they had the lowest yielding areas because the drought was the most severe, the percentage advantage that the project had was the greatest. And that is really to be expected, because if you do the right things, it's going to help you. I mean, a rising tide floats all boats. A good year makes all crops look good, but a bad year, that's when the differences really show. So the message that we presented back was control what you can control. Because you cannot control the drought, but control what you can, and that's going to help you to get through those tough times and the things you cannot control. So this was one of the messages we got back. By the way, a lot of these slides you are seeing, I prepared for meetings that we have had with these growers. Every time we go there, I wind up having some kind of meeting, and I wrap up everything I've learned during that either week or 3 weeks or whatever it is, and present that back to them. So you're seeing basically the same thing that they were seeing. And so this picture sums it up. That little girl, she's got the project ear in her left hand and the traditional in her right. And I think the smile on her face tells a story. So that brings us to this next year. We started this in November of 2019. So this was phase 2. The lady there on the left holding up the water bottle, that is Harriet, and she is one of our lead farmers. And so she brought in a new group of farmers, and several of those are her kids there in front, but there's several of those other farmers now are participating in this year too. So I got a couple slides here I showed from, so I was there in November and we kind of kicked it off, phase 2, and then I went back in January, kind of did a mid-season crop scouting, that sort of thing, went back again in March. And so, but I've got a few slides here from the January meeting. And what I observed at that time was that this new group of farmers, you know, there are now 40 or maybe 41, and they didn't do everything we suggested. It kind of, you know, they kind of, it ran the whole, I guess you might say, range. Some did everything and some did not very much. But what I was trying to do is to ascertain, to the degree that they followed the suggestions we made, what was their success. And so we identified early on the ground was hard, so we suggested some kind of tillage in order to loosen that up. So some plowed, and then the extent that they worked the ground after the plowing or how they did it factored into the results. And so I'm going to take just a minute to tell, because this is a fairly important point. So they plowed, but there's a term, plant behind the plow. What that means is they go through with this oxen plow and they flop the dirt over, and that leaves the furrow. You know, it's a little swath about that wide, and they drop the seed right on the bottom of that furrow, and then the next time the plow comes over, it flops the ground over on that seed. So you can imagine the depth might be 3 inches, it might be 8 inches. And so that's not very good results. But when we mentioned plowing, that's what some of them thought of, and that's what they did. So definitely not what we wanted, but that's what they did. Some plowed, and then they would drag it and planted behind the plow, and then they would drag a harrow across it, kind of smoothed it out. So that was better. Some plowed, and then they made what they call lines. So they would like make a little trench in the field, and they'd plant the seed in that trench, and then they'd cover that with a hoe. And then some would plow and then run the harrow like we suggested, then make the lines, and then close that with a hoe. And then some would actually do just as we suggested. They'd plant, harrow, and then use the planter. They all couldn't use the planter because there weren't enough planters to go around, and it was getting later. And so we told them, don't wait on the planter. John Meese was there at the time. This was in December. I was there in November, and he went there in December, and they just had to get planted. And they can only plant right after a rain because the ground dries out so quick. So anyway, the objective of the field preparation is to relieve that compaction, remove the weeds, and smooth out the surface. And so if you're going to remove weeds, if you look to the right there on the screen, you can either spray it or you can do some kind of tillage. So that's weed removal. For loosening the soil, you need some kind of tillage. At least we felt like they did there. And so you can see how the purpose of this slide is to demonstrate how massive the root structure of a corn plant will be given the opportunity. We saw that first year corn with roots about this wide because they were so restricted. So that's why we were suggesting some form of tillage. And, you know, we've got compaction here in the United States as well. These are some photos. If you look on the upper left, that guy holding the big clod, that's one piece of dirt, and that's compaction. And then the other fellow that has the two hands and that loose crumbly soil, that's what you want. And then if you look below that, you can see on the left, you can see about 4 inches of nice loose soil. And then on the right side of that lower left picture, you can see with the pink circle, that's compaction. and when it dries out, how hard that gets. And, you know, roots just they're not gonna go through that. And then here, the big picture on the right, that's a field here in the United States where field worked up really nice. Probably, I wasn't there, probably got a rain, maybe got in there with the planter a little bit too quick. And you can see the tractor marks through the field. So, you know, that's compaction. So we've got it here too. So that's why we suggested to plow it, then use a harrow, plant so you wind up with a nice seed bed. And then these are photos actually from our farmers, both new and the lead farmers. By the way, the original group of 10 or 11, we now call them lead farmers, and they are mentoring this next group. So they hand selected the next group, and they're each working with 3 or 4 farmers. So the person on the left, and of course I wouldn't show his picture or tell his name, that would be embarrassing, but he did the plant behind the plow method, and that corn just doesn't look very good. And the people on the right, that's a new farmer group. The lady is actually our farmer, and that's her husband and son, and they did the plow, harrow, and plant method. So you can see right there the results. And these are photos I was showing back to the group so that they could see everything that I was seeing as much as I could, because I mean, they know what they're doing, but I'm trying to help them see the bigger picture. These are 2 fields, look pretty good. This is Catherine Chikobeki in the green shirt, and that's Ruthie, one of our lead farmers there in the multicolored dress. And Catherine's doing a pretty good job. By the way, she has told me through the interpreter that she wants to be a lead farmer next year, and she's gonna compete with the other lead farmers to see who's going to be the best. So she's pretty competitive, and she's doing a pretty good job. And this fellow on the right, that's Isaac, and he came up to me during our plot tours of March 2019, so over a year ago, and said, I want to be in your project. And he's a good farmer. This is his project field that he's standing in. I took this in January. He planted that in December. And I want to make a point here. If you look at that photo of Isaac and look to the very extreme left side of that, you're going to see part of one row of corn that's much taller. And that he planted, that's not the project. That was planted in November, early November, before I got there. And then when I was there in November, the second wave of rains was just stopping. And so that second mid-November planting period was just coming to a close. So Isaac actually waited until early December to plant this. So the corn that you can see, that one row had a 1 month head start. When I was there in January, I thought, wow, we're going to get waxed here. This is not going to make the project look really good. But remember that, because I've got another slide we're going to look at later on. So the way I wrapped it up is that with our group there in January about field preparation is that I did analysis. I gave it an eyeball estimate when I was out in each of these fields. We had, I think, 41 to look at, and I think I got to 36 of them. And I would just do an assessment. Okay, is this a half a stand? Is this a third of a stand? And I would just make that note. And like, is it perfectly, are all the plants the same height? Do they vary widely? And so I just kind of gave a pretty subjective view of each one, just try to eyeball it. And then I summarized it all at the end. And the green bar is the emergence. In other words, what is the percent of stand that they've got? Is it 40%, 50%, full stand? And then the yellow bar is how uniform they are. And so the message here is that the closer they got to our recommendation, which would be the far right graph or set of bars, that's what we really wanted. That's what we really recommended. The closer they got to that, the better their results were. Talked a little bit about erosion. I saw some planting up and down the field, up and down the hill, excuse me. And so, you don't want to do that. So, I made that, tried to make that point in a nice way. And this, these fields are not, this is nothing like their fields. Their fields are a little tiny, but I brought this out to show that, we practice contour farming here in the United States. And so trying to practice what we preach, I guess you might say. We talked about hybrid selection. We provided For the new farmers, we provided a half an acre, and for the lead farmers, they got a full acre because they were kind of doing work for us. But these are the things that they need to think about in hybrid selection. And I brought this up to them because I was hearing discussion about, they were thinking about hybrids, choosing hybrids on ways that were not really very scientific or not really thought through as much as what I think they should be. And so I was trying to bring this up. These are the things to consider when you're choosing a hybrid. Many seed corn companies, they're good hybrids readily available. So use your own experience, of course. Visit with neighboring farmers, talk with company representatives, look at company literature. There's a variety of ways that you could gather information. I heard the comment that there were differences in hybrids with their susceptibility to stalk borer. Stalk borer, they call armyworm, and it is severe over there. So I wanted to track that down, and I wanted to report back to him what I found, because there could be a difference. Hybrids can vary in how they resist or tolerate infestations of disease, bugs, drought, various things. I didn't see a difference between hybrids in the stalk borer susceptibility, but I did see a difference in the planting date. It seemed like the earlier planted corn was handling the stalk borer better. Kind of makes sense. It was bigger, more robust when the infestation started. So I wanted to pass that information on. They also talked about some hybrids emerged better than others. That also was not true. But what I did find was that how they prepared the soil and the planting conditions, that had a big impact on emergence. And so I really wanted to make that point so they were not blaming the wrong thing for something that they had done incorrectly. And of course, I was diplomatic when I did that. Tried to be anyway. There were really 4 planting dates this past year. There was that early November, and this one field happened to have 3 of them. There was that early November planting time before I got there. There was that mid-November, which was wrapping up when I got there. There was an early December, which quite a bit of the project corn was early December. And then there was a mid-December. And then actually there was a little bit, like maybe 5% planted in a really late December, early January. But the November and December, those 4 periods caught most of it. And you can see the difference. I just thought that was kind of a neat looking slide. We recommend planting early. It didn't work out for the project corn because we weren't there at that first rain, and we recommend that they plant right after the first rain. What we found, as I said, the early mid-November seemed to be less affected by the stalk borer. Also, the recent rains, now I was there giving this presentation in January. When I got there, it was dry. While I was there, I don't remember how long I was there, but it was, I don't know, a week and a half or something like that. While I was there, it rained. And so the latter part of that I was there, I had slides of corn that was kind of, responding to that rain. But anyway, that recent rain was going to help that early planted corn get closer to maturity. The point that I wanted to make was that even though we recommend planting early, and that project corn wasn't as early as some of it, don't give up hope, because you still have a lot of influence on what happens. It's the growing season after you plant is a lot more important than the growing season before you plant. And that extra few weeks can be important, but it is not as important as what happens later. So planting date and yield are not highly correlated. Rainfall and yield, especially rainfall at the proper time, are very highly correlated. So you need rain, especially over there, to get the crop up. During that rapid growth stage, when corn gets to be about knee high, it'll grow 2 to 3 inches a day. And then during pollination, you need rain, and then of course at grain fill. So this was a slide I took early, before the rain. This was in January. That was December corn on the left. It was in that rapid growth stage and it couldn't grow because it was really drought stricken. And the November corn hadn't got there yet. It was looking pretty good. So the message I was making is that you've still got, even though you didn't plant it as early as you wanted, you've still got good potential. This is some University of Illinois data. I showed them just to show them that we kind of face the same thing here. And we are about 5 months later. So our April is kind of like their November. So if you add 5 months on to what I'm talking about for them, that would kind of get it to ballpark here. So boiling it all down, we still prefer early planting. There will be more rain during the course of the growing season if you plant and capture those first rains. It did seem like it helped with the armyworms. It lets you spread out your maturities, and it lets you harvest a little earlier. We talked about weed control. These are the methods. You can either spray or you can use a hoe, or you can do both. And so the point I wanted to make is that this field where this photo is, they didn't, whoever it was, this is not a project farm, they didn't do either, I don't think, because that's a mess. So we don't want that. So if you spray, then here's some advantages. It's fast, lets you do other things, it's effective, you'll have control even if it rains. Disadvantages are maybe it doesn't kill all species. You got to do it right, the right rate, you got to apply it properly, and it may need rain for activity on some of the pre-emerge herbicides. With a hoe, advantages and disadvantages. Maybe it's cheaper, depends if you got to hire much help. You can incorporate the urea, that's a really crucial advantage for the hoe. It'll aerate the soil, and there is no known resistance to a hoe. It will control any weed. There's disadvantages. It's time consuming, maybe you miss other things, maybe the weeds get too big, maybe it gets rainy, can't get in there with your hoe. So the herbicide that we provided is locally called Fighter. It's a premix of a couple of different herbicides that I use right here in the United States. And so they've got good access to chemistry, and it works. So one of our lead farmers did this little strip trial on his own. He did not apply between those two rows on the right, and he did apply the rest of the field. So you can see it worked pretty well. That grass is a really tough grass. That's Kapinga, and that is an ornery critter. It is a hard one to control. What we suggest is that what doesn't come up, they come back in and take that out with a hoe. You got to use the right rate, correct rate. One of our lead farmers, Mavis, said, this Fighter, it's not working. Here I sprayed, and only where I sprayed 4x rate did it work. Well, actually the proper rate was 200 milliliters. She used a 1/4 rate that did not work very well, but when she used the proper rate, it worked pretty good. Now she broadcast sprayed that, and you can see that corn's just a little yellow. What we recommend is that not to broadcast it over the crop, but go ahead and spray down between the rows. But you can see it was killing even those weeds that were big, and she sprayed over the top. It was killing those and pulling them back. So here's the methods, hoe by hoe. This fella, he had some tough luck with chemistry last year, and he just didn't want to fool with it. That's fine. His method worked. That's pretty clean. And this guy, he's a new farmer, and he thought that spraying was okay, so he sprayed it twice. That looks pretty good too. And this person, they sprayed it, and then they came back with a hoe, and that looks pretty good. So all the methods work. The farmers need to decide what they want to do, what works best for them, but the main thing is they keep it clean. We talked about fertility. That was one of the areas that we really felt like they needed some adjustment in their methods. You can see this particular slide, the field on the left has a much darker green color. It probably has adequate fertility. And that field on the right, it looks like it's just a little bit short. You can just see that if you didn't have that field on the left to compare to, you might not know that. But so I've got some pop-ups here. So our recommendation, the best results basically is what we recommended. Put the full rate of their pre-emerge fertilizer on, which is basically their phosphorus-based fertilizer when they plant. And then they will top dress the urea, which is a nitrogen fertilizer, but they are using the common method is incorrect. They wait for a rain. They wait for the corn to get knee high or a little taller. Then they wait for a rain, and then they immediately put the urea on the damp ground. Well, what that does, that moisture will cause the urea prill, that little tiny, like little BB-sized pebble, but that prill will dissolve from the moisture, and then it will go off into the atmosphere as N2, as free nitrogen, so it's lost. So what we have recommended, and for some reason it's been hard to get this message to soak in, but I guess because it's the opposite of what they've been doing for years, they need to go out when the corn is not quite knee high and put the urea on close to the plant and then cover that with a hoe. So that's why I think the spray followed by hoe method may be the best for weed control. That will let them incorporate that urea, cover it with dirt, it will not evaporate, and then when they get that rain, it'll dissolve and go into the soil. So that's our recommendation, and those that did that had better results. And
Eric?
yes, question?
This is Dean Mefford.
Yeah, Dean.
I was wondering as I was watching this, I'm an old farm boy too, and I worked for Ralston for a number of years, running all over the world. But as I looked at this, and I know there's been a lot of money put out there for wells and so forth across Africa, but thinking of, is there any opportunity, I'm talking about in the future, the next phases and so forth, for us to raise money to put some more wells in and then go to a drip irrigation kind of program where you don't lose all that moisture if you do it by drip, or rather than spraying it in the air all the time. So I just wondered what you thought about that. Must have muted me.
Hi, Eric, can you hear? What's going on?
Hello?
Must have lost him. Give him a little bit more time.
Is Eric
He's
not
actually
on?
here, just he's not even muted at all.
So he didn't hear my question, I guess.
And that's an important question, because I think speaking about Zambia, I've seen some Israeli companies introduce that drip irrigation, and they put these little hoses in the fields that just drop water per plant.
Mm-hmm. Well, they could control their growing season a lot better if they could do that, if they had some kind of drip irrigation system.
Right.
Actually, our club and African Vision of Hope, that's Bob and Judy Bertles, they have a farm, about 40 acres. And several years ago, we bought them an irrigation system and then put in a well for them. And they're using it on their farm. And they, of course, are close to this village. And they were a part of this project with Eric Dolbeare. So the word is getting out. And it is possible through some of our global grants that we may be able to install some wells and maybe start them into the irrigation.
John, that would be great because, you know, they're talking about soybeans and other crops as well. And, you know, the irrigation requirements or the need for moisture is much different from one crop to the other. Eric would know all this if he's still on there. He knows it very well. But, you know, I think that's the kind of thing that we have to sit down and do a little planning with and say, okay, what crops do they want to raise? And that's down the road. I'm not talking about next year or whatever. You need to.
Yeah,
They're doing a fantastic job right now. I'm impressed.
Actually, one of the reasons we did this vocational training team was that we were going to work in an area that they were closely connected with African Vision of Hope. And we knew that they would help us to select the right farmers. Eric didn't tell you this, but up until this year, all of last year, African Vision of Hope provided an interpreter and a driver free of charge to this project. And of course, you got to realize every farm is on a dirt road and they're not close together.
Yeah, right.
And so it takes more than 3 or 4 days to just cover 11 farmers. So there's been close work with those people, and they are using irrigation.
Right.
And not only are they growing corn, which you have to grow corn there.
Yes, you do.
Because everybody there who has, have we got your back, Eric? But everybody there eats corn. That's the main staple at every meal is ground corn. And if they don't have enough of that, they die. And that's what was happening in that area. Every year there was a drought, they would lose older people and children. And so that's one reason we selected that area to do our first global grant with African Vision of Hope. And it's been wonderful.
It has. It's unbelievable.
They do 50,000 meals a month. African Vision of Hope on that 40-acre farm grow enough for 50,000 meals a month in that area.
Well, the interesting thing is, as we move forward and we want to get over, we've talked about this, of producing, helping them learn how to produce more protein, meat, milk, and eggs, and that kind of thing. And again, that's down the road, but it's important to balance out their diets much better. And,
yes,
and
that's
they
right.
will need a lot of corn when they do that. A lot of
That's
corn
right.
and soybean meal.
Yeah.
So,
If it doesn't go into, the corn doesn't go into them to eat, then it's going to go to their animals.
yes, exactly.
I think
And you
Eric
can
is back.
And you can use the
What about-
byproducts of the corn to produce a lot of milk. I mean, that's the thing a lot of people don't realize. You don't have to feed the ear of corn. The stalk and the fiber also has protein in it. So if you develop the program correctly, you can take the residue that he was talking about taking off the field. You can compete with that and put it into a beef program, which they need because it provides a fiber, but it also has the protein in it. So there's a lot that can be done with what they've started now. We can really grow that tremendously and really improve their situation. They keep cutting me off when I talk. I don't know why.
Am I back on?
Yes,
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
you back, Eric.
Okay. Well, I
Go
will
ahead.
try. I'll try to be more timely here. So I'm trying to get back to the slideshow, but it's not.
This is where you were.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have it in the entire. I can make do. So back on the irrigation, I think that's an important thing that could be done. With irrigation, you've got to have one for every farmer and for every field. I think there's ways that we could intervene. They have an interest in forming a co-op, maybe getting some mechanization, something that could be shared, like a tractor could be shared by, 40 or 50. So I think there's ways that we could get more bang for the buck, so to speak. But I think down the road, that might be a possibility. I saw a little irrigation, but it was all next to, creek valleys and river valleys where they've got water, easy access to water. So the biggest threat that they're facing, I would put this in slideshow, but for some reason I've got a banner that's covering up my ability to do that. So I'm just going to go like it is here. So the biggest.
Eric, sorry to interrupt. If you press F5, you get a bigger screen.
I'm sorry, press what?
F5.
How about that?
Talk about, yeah, then it's.
I'm glad you were invited to this meeting. I'm gonna, now if I can get through here. This is a recap of what I've talked about.
I'd like to make a short comment. And
Yeah.
that is that.
I told you I would keep it brief.
Yeah, Musonda comes from the area where this vocational training team took place. That's where he was born.
Oh, great. Is this where we were? No, here.
Right there.
Yeah, so the biggest threat that they're facing is the army worm. And I saw a lot of this. I mean, this was in January, and it was just reeling that crop. Not every. I mean, most fields did not look quite this bad. Many did not look this bad, but this was not uncommon. Almost no fields were unaffected. All had some damage, but some were just really clobbered by it. So we provided superthion, which is an insecticide. A year ago, it worked pretty well. This year, it didn't work very well. And so some of the farmers on their own, could see it was not working because they were actually applying this before I got there. So after John left in December, before I got there in January was the time of the armyworm invasion. And I was actually reading about it in reports and, trying to stay up on what was going on in Zambia. And it was a nationwide problem. So anyway, some of the farmers tried other products. And so during our January meeting, this is part of the recap, I said, okay, I recognize superthion for all of you, it didn't work very well. Some it worked okay, decent, but these products did work. And so again, I was trying to share what we learned from them. And then using the sprayer and insecticides, herbicides, we spent a fair amount of time on proper application, but also the safety aspects of it. And so just trying to help with that education as well. This is Mary Ann on the right. She is Stewart's wife, and there's a group of ladies in Louisiana, Missouri that they made these dresses. They made like over 100, like 108 or something. They wanted me to take them over there and distribute. I thought I was going to hand them off to like one entity, a church or something, but no, I had to hand them out individually. So I handed them out to the people that I knew, and they loved them. And I just had to get this photo. This is Mary Ann and her three daughters. They're all sporting their dresses. I was taking photos for the presentation, and this little girl walked up and in perfect English said, "Are you taking pictures?" And I said, "Yes, I am. May I take one of you?" But I mean, she's just as pretty as could be, and that pretty umbrella. So I just had to include that. This is a little farmer meeting. The ladies sitting back against the wall are our farmers, and the young lady sitting there on the left, that's Naomi. She is our newest team member. She's a native Zambian, and she's a full-time student in the medical field, but she works for us on weekends, which is about the amount of time that we need. And actually, I invited Naomi to participate, but she doesn't have power right now. She sent me a text and said no power. So anyway, we were able to communicate pretty frequently, several times a week over WhatsApp, and she's knows what we're doing, and she's kind of leading it while none of us from the U.S. can be there. So we're really glad to have her on board. We did in March. We did had field days both a year ago in March and this past March, and this year we had even last year we had the participants lead a part of it. This year we put more of the instruction coming from the lead farmers. We had 2 last year. We had 3 this year, and we had about 120 total attendance, which was really pretty good, I thought. That would have been good for a plot tour here. I used to be in the seed business. I'd have been delighted with that. So they turned out pretty well. So what we wanted to show is that the new methods are working. This is a field. This is one of our new farmers. On our right, his left, that's the project corn, and that's his traditional corn on the left side of the picture. And the main difference there is fertility. So, and actually that corn on the left was planted a little ahead. It should have had the advantage. And so our methods are working. Okay, remember Isaac. So that field that I thought in January we're going to get waxed by the traditional corn, look at the slide on the right. The right side of that corn is the project field. And that dead corn on the left is a traditional field. And this was in March, and you'd seen the slide from January. And I couldn't believe it. I was walking through that. First, the project, it looked great, nice ears. I was feeling pretty good. And I walked into that traditional field and I said, Isaac, what happened here? Tell me the difference. I didn't say, what'd you do wrong? I just said, tell me the difference, because it had looked so good. Well, turns out he used the full recommendation of fertilizer on the project field and about half rate on the other. and it ran out of gas. And then when the dry weather hit, it just didn't have it didn't have what it needed to to finish out. And so the ears were small, and it was not very good. This is Crispin Kacha. He is leading this field day. That's his corn. Looks great. The gentleman in green, that is William. He, of course, doesn't need to interpret for Crispin, but we kind of feature him as well. He's kind of the local expert, so we want to keep him involved. The gentleman kind of facing us a little bit is right there in the center. That's Njovu and his wife, Grace. This is his corn. He's a lead farmer. In the first year, his project field was the worst of all 10 by a fair margin. He made several mistakes and just things didn't work out for him very well. But he learned the lesson, and man, this year his corn looks great. So we featured him, and I think he was proud of that, and he did a good job. This is Stuart, another one of our lead farmers. So the typical field day, we would meet at the field and go through some agronomics and then go back and have more discussion. It's really an event. Here you got to worry about how quick can you get done, but there, I mean, they were there. That was their purpose, was to learn, and they wanted to soak up all that you could teach them. This is Naomi. She's leading part of the conversation, gave a couple real motivational talks, 3, one at each plot tour. And also, I didn't realize this at the time, but in addition to English, Naomi speaks Nyanja, which is one of the major languages there, and Bimba, which is the other major language, but also 2 other languages. She speaks 5. And at this particular plot tour, she was speaking in the language that was common to this small community. Not like terribly small, but I mean a subset of the larger Chongwe area. And so it really impressed the folks there. And when I found out about it later, it impressed me also. I didn't know that she was, because to me, they all kind of sounded the same, but that was pretty impressive. I'm really glad to have her on board. This is Mavis. She's one of our lead farmers. She's giving a discussion on soybeans. We feel like crop rotation could really help them. They're not doing it. They need the corn because that's what they eat. And so it's a hard sell to get them to plant something else. And we've not had the success there with soybeans we have with corn, but we're going to, given the opportunity, we're going to keep working on it. Mavis is having some success, but we need to replicate that. So we're learning. This is what this project is about. It's called Nshima, and that is the food that they make from corn. It's that white stuff that I'm picking up there with my right hand. And they grind up the corn and they boil it and cook it down, and it forms, it's kind of like grits, but thicker. And you eat it with your hands. They'll usually, so this is Mavis's mother-in-law feeding me there. Every time I go, everyone, they want to feed me. If it's even remotely close to mealtime, they want to feed me. So, I ate, and it's pretty good. The Nshima itself is really pretty bland, but they serve it with other things. Like this would be collard greens, which is kind of like spinach, or maybe they'll have cabbage. Now, at her home, this was the normal meal. And then if you go to a restaurant like in Chongwe and order this, you'll pick out like chicken or beef or something, and then you get the Nshima and the other stuff along with it. But in the rural areas, sometimes it's just Nshima only. But usually I've found there's at least one vegetable along with it. So, but anyway, it's kind of fun. So this is it. This is the wrap up. I didn't even finish this. As I was going through this, I thought, I'm not talking about the future, but I'm going to spend just about a minute talking about the future. So we have completed now the 2nd successful year. Naomi is there right now, and she's collecting yield information. We won't know for sure. They are harvesting right now, but they talk about yield in terms of bags per acre. A bag is 50 kg. It's about 2 bushel, and that is shelled. So they are harvesting it on the ear. They'll let it dry, they'll store it, and then they'll shell it off like in July. And that's when they'll really be able to tell us, okay, what it made. But the early results from the corn on the cob phase of harvest, we're looking pretty good. it looks like our methods, again, were successful. The year overall is better for all of them because they had better rain. So all corn is better, but I saw plenty of fields when I was there in March that were going to be a bust. So not our fields, but I mean, just driving around, you see them. So what's phase 3 going to look like? Well, some of us would like to move into that this coming year. And we've had 2 years of success. We've got 10 lead farmers. We may adjust that a little bit. We may have a couple lead farmers that are not lead farmers. We may pick up a few of the new ones to be lead farmers, but somewhere around 10 lead farmers we're going to wind up with, maybe 11, maybe 12. So we've got them there, trained up, ready to continue, and they want to continue. We've got Naomi there on the ground that to help. The way I see this working, to make the next major step forward, I mean, we could continue doing what we're doing, but to really make a big step forward and to be life-changing, they really need mechanization. And what we've done, the harrows have helped, the planters have helped, but most of these farmers, not all, but many of them have several acres that they're not farming. For example, Stewart, he's got a couple acres of corn. And he was showing John and I a field that I guess John and I were there at the same time in December. I kind of forget that. Well, anyway, he was showing us a field that he was going to plant this year. And John said, well, why haven't you planted this before? And he hadn't planted it for 4 years. He said, well, don't have the money and just can't get it all done. So I did a little survey, and there are quite a few farmers that would have 3 or 4 times as many acres as they're actually farming. Maybe they farm 1 or 2 and they've got 5 or 6, and some even have more than that. So I think it would be possible to get a group together, form up a co-op that could be the recipient of a simple tractor and a strip till machine. That would allow them, the co-op would be the owner, they would share it, and all this would have to be put in place. I mean, this is not something we're just going to do over a weekend. But this could be put in place. We've got people there that we could form the nucleus with, and eventually get that group up to where we'd need to get up to somewhere around 200 or 300 acres going through this machine eventually, before it would be totally self-sustaining. But it would be something we could work toward, and then these farmers could really change their lives, because then they're no longer just producing the 35 bags of corn that family is going to consume this year, but they're going to produce perhaps 150, and they're going to sell some of it in the market, or perhaps they're going to produce 50 and maybe 30 bags of soybeans or something, and then they can start to improve their standard of living. So that's where the future is. But we've got a lot of challenges, and of course it all takes money. And so I know that John is working with Rotary Foundation on a global grant. Then, I mean, it could even grow from there. But so we're going to try to. I'm not here, I'm not here to ask for money. But so we are going to try to raise it like we did from phase 2 from the district. I know Moore's really supportive of it, and last year the district provided a lot of the funding for this phase 2, and several clubs kicked in. Thankful for all that. And it let us, I think we raised about 25,000. The district kicked in like 15, so that was a bunch. And we were shooting for 30, didn't quite get it, so we scaled back a little bit what we did to match the funding. But we kind of need about 86,000, about 86. We need something in that neighborhood to get up to where we could really do this tractor and strip till machine. But we're going to do whatever we can with whatever we get. So anyway, I just am wanting to tell you that there's plan to, some of us have a vision this is going to go on, and I know several on the committee feel that way. So that's what we're going to do. So anyway, that brings me to the slide you all wanted, which is the last slide. If there's anyone out there, I'd be glad to answer questions.
Very good. Anybody sitting on a question or two?
I would just say if if your club's looking for an international project, this is a good one because you know the people involved. You know me, you know John, you know Bob. You see the results for yourself, and so you know it's going to work. You know it's working. So anyway, that's my plug. I'm sorry I went long. If I hadn't, I think I'd have been pretty close to one if I hadn't gone down there for a while.
No worries there, Eric. I really appreciate you spending the time presenting to us today. Very well done presentation. So from our club to you, thank you very much for that.
Very welcome. Glad to do it. Okay.